Stop dieting when you're young. You can diet later. Like, focus now on eating enough and training really hard and trying to put on muscle if you want to create a body fat, like, settling point that is ideal for you to maintain.
Welcome to the Team LocoFit Roundtable. I'm your host, Laurin and Karina. Each week, we share the evidence-based practices and communication-driven strategies we use with our clients and give you the tools that you need to be successful for life. This week, I'm joined by Coach Karina, and we're dedicating an entire, oh, that's the wrong one. I'm reading, I write these intros, so I don't mess it up. That is the next intro. We're going over body fat set point. Wow, I was like, we're dedicating an entire episode to sleep, prelude to Wednesday. Yeah. We're going over body fat set point, and we had a lot of questions about this. When you guys can submit the questions to the anonymous Google form that we have, I periodically look through there to pick some topics, and so many questions were about body fat, some version of this. I'm going to read a specific question, but there were many versions of questions just like this, and we have a lot of conversations with clients about this as well, so it's really, really common.
Yeah.
So my question is probably going to tell me what I don't want to hear, but I know you guys are honest. I've been reverse dieting / diet cycling for the last 5 years. I will admit I've spent more time in a deficit than a surplus or maintenance calories. I'm always cutting and gaining back in my reverse diet the stubborn 10 pounds I want to keep off. I'm not naturally a skinny person and have to work very hard to get lean. I do have a history of eating disorders in my late teens, early 20s, and being a cardio bunny because I was obsessed with staying as lean as I could. For reference, I'm 5'6" and around 74 kilograms, and then I'll cut again to drop to 69 to 70 kilos, which is where I'm happy, but then I reverse diet because I can't maintain 1,200 calories, ... and then I gain the weight back. Any advice? Is this just body fat set point or not spending enough time in maintenance at higher calories? Thank you so much, and I love the content. So,
you're welcome. I'm just kidding.
No, a lot of these questions will have that in there, and I'm like, oh, that makes me so happy. And this, like I said, was some version of this question a lot of different people had. In this situation, I mean, we've seen this with how many clients? It's
$1 million question. Can I maintain 10 pounds lower than I am right now? 15 pounds lower.
Stubborn body fat.
10 pounds over stage weight, etc.
Yeah. That's a whole different. 10 pounds over stage weight is very different than 10 stubborn pounds. So we'll say that really quickly. We've said it a million times, but in case you're new, trying to maintain above 10 pounds of stage weight
or just any given number.
Any number.
Your physiology is going to be so different than the next person. Some people have no problem maintaining 10 pounds over stage weight, but if you take someone who's 5'10", who got super lean, they're going to probably, try to have to maintain a lot higher. But I think a good way to start answering this question is defining body fat set point or settling point. Mm-hmm. If you want to go ahead and do that.
So, I would say that typically we do agree that there is a settling point that most people are pretty comfortable with.
It is in the literature, it's still a theory.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's just anecdotally speaking, obviously from ourselves and from working with so many people, we can confidently say that everyone has a settling point that their body is very comfortable at, and that it's really hard for them to either get leaner than or
even maintain above.
Yeah, exactly.
They start to notice deteriorations above a certain settling point, whether it's your mood or you're having joint pain or you're just you're feeling maybe you're unhealthy, your blood panels are off.
Like I was talking about earlier, when I was 20 to 30 pounds over this weight, I've always had sciatica since I was younger, but oh my god, it was so bad during that time. I couldn't sit for more than 10 minutes. It was just so painful.
So there's going to be issues below and above the settling point, but basically what the theory is that everybody's body has this kind of natural place that it likes to settle, and I would agree that we definitely see this. So the short answer is that yes, there is some type of settling point that we're comfortable with, and going above and below, we're going to see some issues. But we can change it. The long answer is yes, there are going to be things that we can do to change it. But first, what would be some of those issues? We always talk about, I think, we say things like that, oh, we're going to run into issues if we stay too lean. And then people are like, well, what are those issues? Okay, well, what does that actually look like? So first, one of the number one issues we're going to see, and this doesn't always mean that you're too lean, but this is definitely a side effect of staying too lean, is increased hunger, really low satiety, and just like a general food focus. Like that's really common when you're either too lean, or because there's people who have reverse dieted and they've maintained their very lean weight who still have all these same side effects. So it's mostly like a body fat issue is what we're like seeing with that hunger. Would you agree there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just the regulating hunger and satiety, being able to be full at all, or just never not feeling hungry, is definitely a side effect of being too lean for too long. I think one of the most quote unquote like severe repercussions of staying too low or being too lean below your body fat settling point is just the downregulation of hormones. Especially in women. Obviously we work with a lot of females, and a super easy way to tell whether you're too lean is these girls who are maybe not on birth control but that haven't had a period in so long, and there comes other things like mood swings and just
thyroid suppression.
Thyroid.
Every hormone. It's not just sex hormones, but those are typically hit pretty hard. And thyroid for sure is one of those. If you're staying too lean, your body is just like, we're not pumping this out. You're at a smaller body weight. Why would it have the same amount, right?
Your metabolism is adaptive. Like everything will downregulate if the amount you're eating and the amount of body fat you have downregulates as well.
The other thing too is you never feel like you're recovering, and you can never really add any muscle.
Always tired.
Training is just like a bitch. You're just kind of generally more exhausted than you should be, and these are just, again, really common signs that we see when we are in a deficit. So if you're wondering, okay, well, what would be some of the side effects of me being too lean? Well, these are those issues. And then lastly, just kind of that low energy and like low mood. Like you're just gonna have a little bit more that on edge type feeling.
And on the other side of that, not even being too lean, but not eating enough as well. Because I know this person mentioned that they had been kind of like going through those cycles for the past 5 years, and I had a time where I was definitely going through those cycles for like 6 years straight, but I never spent enough time not dieting. I was definitely spending too much time dieting, and it was really frustrating to feel like I could never change my body, like the way it looked, because I never gave it enough time to put on muscle. And like I'm really interested in just obviously not only the metabolic impact, but kind of like the impact on muscle across the lifespan. But in general, like you have to give yourself enough time to put on muscle to actually change your body. And speaking to competitors as well, I think like too many people who don't really understand bodybuilding think that bodybuilding is just about like how lean you can get, when really like the key factor to changing your body composition, changing your settling point, to changing your metabolism is like the golden tissue of like muscle, So I think that if you stay too lean for too long, you kind of really shoot yourself in the foot with giving yourself the ability to put on enough muscle. And if you do that too long, in terms of like before you hit a certain age, you kind of essentially
really limit that growth.
You limit that growth. I think it's like around 25, 26, like that's kind of like, all right, that's your cap. So if you're spending, and a lot of girls do, if you're spending ages 18 to 23, 24 dieting and suppressing that growth, you're never really probably gonna look like some of these really jacked girls that you want to look like down the road. So, or
just you also have to take into consideration the history that those certain people have. Have they been doing sports for their entire life, right? Have they been super active? Soccer, track, gymnastics, whatever you did, right? And you're very active, and then usually as you got older and you were doing sports, you did some type of structured lifting. Whether or not it was like a quality program or not, it can be determined by the program, but usually you're doing something, right? So you're building that kind of base there, and then if you continue with that as you get older, you're already going to have, and then you can look up and you're like, I have 10 years of a base, when you're 25, because you started when you were 15 or maybe even younger.
Right, I think that within that developing age time frame, that's when metabolism is the most quote unquote like plastic, right? Like that's where you really set yourself up when you're 40, 50. And so if we have all these girls spending time like constantly dieting, it's like, man, as far as what I understand now about muscle physiology and how it impacts us in the long term and how it changes throughout the lifespan, it's like stop dieting when you're young. You can diet later. Like, focus now on eating enough and training really hard and trying to put on muscle if you want to create a body fat like settling point that is ideal for you to maintain.
Yeah, and most people still misunderstand that the body that they probably want is just a more muscular body.
Yeah.
And they just think that it's a smaller body.
Yeah,
And
no.
being more muscular, you actually are smaller at
Yeah.
the same weight. So
Yeah.
it's one of these misnomers that still needs to be like worked through, and we're all guilty of it, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
No,
and
definitely.
even this person, she mentioned that, you know, she did have a history of eating disorders, and, you know, I don't know what that looked like, you know, how severe it was, for how long it was, but was obsessed with being lean and wanting to do a lot of cardio, right? So you're
Yeah.
constant, like, doing too much cardio really wreaks havoc. Like, we see just a really high spike in cortisol with people. They're not really recovering. They are hampering muscle growth. Now, cardio is not bad. There are a lot of benefits to cardio. And me and Jill actually recorded a podcast. That'll be up before this. So go back and listen to the cardio podcast if you haven't. There's a lot of benefits to cardiovascular training. So that is not to say don't ever do cardio because you want to have gains. Like, that's the other misnomer, right? It's either like do all of the cardio or do none of the cardio.
Yeah,
There's
no.
probably some in between here that like we can all agree on, and that everybody can have. But if you're just doing cardio because you want to be smaller,
On top of
not
barely eating.
yeah, that's going to take this person who's asking this question, or anybody else listening who's in that situation, a lot longer to recover and a lot longer to build that tissue.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, you know, even with myself and other people I know who have had disordered eating or eating disorders, like growing up, you know, that's already years and years of dieting experience. So it's just another factor we have to overcome, versus people who, you know, you look at who never had that. They might have a very different metabolism just because they never went through those chronic periods of restriction.
Yeah.
And I feel like, you know, again, I don't know, but I think it'd be interesting. And the only way that you would ever be able to find this is just, you know, anecdote. But and maybe like you could analyze like questionnaires, but looking at people who have had eating disorders and just see how much more adaptive their metabolisms are at a later stage. And I know I have a very adaptive metabolism both ways. Being adaptive means you can go high and you have to go low. So it doesn't means you can maintain typically a little bit higher with higher food and less output, but you have to get really low and have low food and high output to see changes. And I would just be interested to see if there was any correlation. I've seen it with certain clients that there could seem to be a correlation there. But
I
just
mean,
in general,
evolutionarily, like that would make sense, right? Like, you put your body through this stressful event, your body had to survive, and now it's almost like programmed to do that moving forward. So that would make sense.
And we just see that with clients who have a long dieting history, and this person certainly does. And the other part of our question that's really, really important, which is kind of the part where we can answer, well, can you change it? How do you change it? You know, you hit it here. You've been doing the reverse and the diet cycles, which is what we do recommend. If people do want to change their set point, the best way to do this is to go through periods of building your calories up, training hard, recovering, doing all those right things, getting your hormones in check, and then dieting, trying to maintain some of that diet, leanness. You know, you're going to go up, right? Like, using arbitrary numbers, say you're, because this person is around 160 or so, and then you go to 150, and then you go back up to like 155 or whatever, and then you come back down, and, you know, you kind of etch back down. Like, that is the goal of these cycles. But asterisk, if you're spending more time in the deficit than you are not even just a surplus phase, just a maintenance phase. I think people really, really misunderstand the importance of maintenance phases and how much work is actually done there. It's not like exciting.
Yeah, no.
There's nothing like week to week changes are like minuscule as far as like your physique goes, but you're in a way better place if you actually go through those phases of maintenance.
Yeah, and it's hard because it's like not the sexy thing to do, right? You're like not losing a pound every week and you're not getting that like feeling of accomplishment. But being able to maintain a body weight composition while also like eating enough is really important for your ability to lose weight in the future, and then trying to create a new set point from that. I think it's also important to talk about that creating new set points, I think, at least for me, as far as I've seen it, is a little bit easier in specific populations. So for me, for example, I've never really been able to maintain like 10 pounds lower than I am right now. But every time I've dieted, like gone back up and dieted, this is definitely the leanest I've maintained in a while. But I've been this weight before, but with a lot more body fat and a lot less muscle. So I think also we might end up around the same weight, but how we look at that settling point every time can change. And we can see improvement and progress that way. Like you're back at your settling point that your body's super comfortable at, and it's really hard for you to maintain lower than that. But are you leaner now? Like, do you have more muscle and less body fat? So I think that's another way to look at it, is maybe not always aiming for a super low body settling point. Like I don't think I'd be able to comfortably sit at like 112, 115. You know, my body is very comfortable at 130. But again, last time I was 130, 3-4 years ago, I looked very different.
Yeah, and that's where the taking time off,
training,
you know, not even just being in the surplus, just being in a maintenance phase, training, recovering, you know, working on all the other things, hormones, digestion, you know, stress perception, all of that stuff too. Like that all matters, and those are all things that can actively be worked on. Your relationship with food, all those things can be improved in a maintenance phase. It's just not like the crazy data, it's more of the qualitative data that we're working on. But this is the kind of stuff that is going to help you when you actually do go into a deficit. Now you're actually going to be able to successfully move from the 74 kilos, and maybe you go to 72 and you can actually stay there, right? Maybe you don't need to go all the way down to 69 and then come back up, because maybe going down to 69 kilos is what is having you bounce back, right? Like that is also a thing. I know for me, I have very specific weights. Like I can maintain within a certain range. If I get a little sloppy, I kind of go above a certain range. If I'm not eating as much or I'm really active, I'll drop below. If I want to diet, I can comfortably do it to a certain range, but after that certain rung, it's a very, very challenging process, which is fine if I want to engage in it, but I'm not going to be able to stay there. And it's just the reality, and I feel all of those effects that we talked about in the beginning, and they don't ever change. They're always the same effects. It's always around the same type of weight, same type of body composition, and there is something to be said about having those goals and manipulating your body comp for, you know, a physique competition or a photo shoot or you know, some kind of weight cut sport. Like there's reasons to do it, and we fully support those reasons. But if the reason for this person asking in particular is I want to change my settling point, well, we need to change what we're doing, because we've been doing this for 5 years and it's not working. So first you need to spend more time in just a maintenance phase, and then when you actually do build up that better layer of muscle, you're going to be able to look that way that you want. And maybe it's not the 69 kilos that you wanted. Maybe it is 72. And you're like, damn, like I look pretty good. And that's when you're going to be that denser look and that smaller look and everything. That's when like the clothes are fitting better and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of wins that we can see there. And I think that that's really the key point to changing the settling point, is saying, okay, I need to be in this, you know, maintenance phase. And I think people get turned off because they're like, I don't want to be in a surplus. Okay, maybe we don't have to be in a surplus. You know, we don't need to be pounding food every week where you're gaining a pound every week, right? We don't need to be doing that either, because certainly some people's metabolisms can't handle that. And I feel like that's like the other response. Either like you're dieting or you're gaining. And it's like, well, maybe we can just kind of,
not doing.
We call it the roughly maintain, you know, plus or minus a few pounds, where you don't really feel any issues, you know. And I think that that's a really key place to get. And just also, like Karina kind of mentioned, like changing your perception on what your settling point should be or your ideal weight should be. And maybe again, it's not a set number. And I know we all have those certain numbers, because like we have to be honest with ourselves. Like there's a certain amount of weight and body fat that we all like to personally carry. That is understandable, you know what I mean? Like we both said, like we both have numbers, and we're like, this number yes, this number no, like this, like everybody has those numbers, right? But when the numbers are fairly close, like those 10 pounds, maybe there is a lot, there is room to change. And maybe
like
it's
just
only
don't
5.
get too attached to those numbers, because then you're like, you could look good, but you're so attached to this number that you're like,
you can't even see
I'm
it.
not happy. Exactly. So
you're still like, you know, you have a 6-pack and or whatever it is for you that you really want. Like you have what you want to achieve, but you can't see it.
You're blinded by the number on the scale. That's where like those progress photos and measurements sometimes are, and you know, analyzing how your clothes fit differently might come into play. And I mentioned briefly, like for me, I've only seen like specific populations have success in drastically changing their body fat settling point. I actually have a few clients who have done this, but it's because they were pretty obese and pretty overweight. I had a client I have 2 clients who've lost over 100 pounds at this point. And one of them I've been working with for almost 3 years now. And I've been able to watch her create new settling points. And we would go through diets, and then we reverse, and then we diet, and then we reverse. And every single time, not to say that when she started working with me, she had a ton of weight to lose, but she started at a very high place in the beginning. And she also had room for muscle growth as well. So I think when you have that kind of room where you didn't spend too much time building muscle before, or you didn't spend your whole life playing sports and maybe around your natural settling point, if you're starting pretty overweight or a novice resistance training person, then you have a lot of room for change there. But I think it's important to be realistic about that as well.
Yeah, and that's a case where that client is starting above their settling point, likely, right? Like, so that's what we're going to see. They're healthy settling point. So we're going to see those big changes on the way down for those clients. But if you're within that 10, 15-ish pound, that's going to be like a smaller window, and it certainly can happen.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a smaller window, and that's where, again, being realistic about it is important. And I can look all day long at people who are super, super tiny. They walk around with a 6-pack and like glute tie-ins, and you're like, damn, that's amazing. Like, that looks so great. Like, I love how they look. And I've been there too.
Yeah.
And I appreciate how it looks, but I also know those side effects, and I have to be realistic that is not a body that I can walk around and be like my most functional and optimal self.
Yeah.
Like, it looks great for pictures, and that's about it. Like, literally no other time is it worth a fuck, to be honest.
Yeah.
So
it's so annoying once every time I have prepped, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm finally at this place, but now I feel trapped because I can't really, and it's always like for shows, right? Because when you're getting ready for a show, you're like, all right, I'm not trying to fuck around. Like, I'm hitting everything to the T. I'm like, man, I like this body composition, but I'm so bored just like eating out of Tupperware all day and like not being able to like go out late at night and things like that when I want to go out to dinner.
It's a challenge. Like, everything is a challenge when you're that lean. It's like everything has to be planned. If you stay out late, it's like, oh, better slam some caffeine. Like, otherwise I can't stay awake. You're like living off of that. And obviously to some degree, yes, like, we can all do it for set goals and for set reasons. Yeah. But it's like, to what degree do I want to be like, oh, I have to take a nap today because I can't function, versus like, oh, I'm just kind of tired. Like, it'd be cool if I took a nap, but like, I can get through it. Or like, just the chronically like just edgy, like, so there is part of it where you do have to be realistic about, is this for the person listening or anybody listening, are these numbers maybe too close, right? Like, can you get a little bit lower? Yes, but can you get all the way down to the bottom of where you really like? Maybe not. And you have to recognize that there are other things that you can do in order to still have a better body composition around a certain weight. But you have to be realistic with yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, as always, thank you guys for listening. If you want to submit any questions for us, you can. I'll put the link below. It's always actually below in all the show notes. So it's totally anonymous. So you can put as much detail as you want.
Except for talking trash. You can't talk trash about us.
I mean, I guess you could. And then
you could, because you'd be safe because we wouldn't know who you are.
We wouldn't know it was. So
that's not nice.
All right, Karina says don't talk trash. I say I don't give a shit. But say whatever you want. But we probably won't answer that one on the podcast. Just letting you know. Like, this show sucks. Okay.
It'd be so funny if we had like a mean tweets episode. Not that I don't think anyone would have anything mean to say about it.
I'm like, damn, I feel like we try to do a good job, but like, nobody's
you
like...
guys suck. Oh, wow. What can we do to improve?
Like, people who have that stuff genuinely like go out of their way to like create polarizing content.
Like, you really are bored. Yeah.
No, like the people who are getting that kind of stuff, they're
yeah.
generally putting up stuff that is pretty polarizing, and it's like, I don't
We're just trying to help.
Maybe you find body fat settling point polarizing, but for the most part, the stuff that we cover is pretty straightforward. Yeah. So, as always, if you guys found value in the show, please share and subscribe. We're on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. This helps us grow the show and continue our mission to educate everybody in the industry. And as always, if you have, I said as always twice. See, I have a script. I'm not even reading it. Here we go. This is why I have the script. It's right here.
Beat of her own drum.
I know. Check out the website, teamlogofit.com. You can check out the articles, apply for coaching, or send us an email for any of the questions that you guys have. So thank you, and we'll talk to you guys next time.